Welcome everybody to the webinar going from 1 to 10, finding a repeatable sales motion. Uh, I'm happy that you participated on this webinar, especially right now when the weather is getting better. I believe there are way more things you can do outside, not to be just a webinar. Uh, why we actually started. Uh, or what was the trigger why we organized this webinar was quite simple because once we were talking with many of our prospects and clients, we were pretty much getting to the same issue which most of them were solving, and it was okay. Hey, we already manage as a founders, we managed to find a product market. We managed to get the first one, two, three salespeople into our company. And the biggest question for us is right now how we can prepare the organization to actually grow into way bigger, how we can go from few salespeople to many salespeople. And in the life of startups, there are many challenging points. The first challenging point is actually to come up with a product that solves some need. Then that the founder, the another challenging milestone is to get into to find a product market fit, so that you actually get some clients which are willing to pay for the product and they're happy with the product, so that they even recommend you to other clients. Then another challenging point is to get the first salespeople and on board, and then also to prepare and to build a proper sales organization actually. So from 3 people to go 30 people to go to 100 people, and it's not just about getting the people into the organization. It has a lot. Also, the organization has to be ready. And then I always say that the best way how we can learn how to play the game is to teach to get know-how from the ones who already play the game. And that's why I'm more than happy and honored to get Bart and Tatum, Bart and pardon me, Bart and Arnold as our speakers, because they're both very senior salespeople and they both were managing growing sales organizations. And we'll get a little bit I will introduce them a little bit in detail afterwards. Yep. By the way, this is just the first out of the series of webinars. We'll be doing them on a regular basis, and for the ones which are also in Prague or close to Prague or Czech Republic, we'll be doing also meetups with the ones single purpose, and that is sharing know-how among the sales leaders and bringing the world-class know-how. Okay. For the ones who don't know me or who doesn't know SalesDog, what we do, together with my friend, I co-founded SalesDog 6 years ago with a simple mission. We just wanted to help tech companies to get their products on the market faster and more successfully. Over the years, we developed into the full-service B2B sales agency. So it's not just about sales outsourcing. We also involve sales training, sales recruitment, or setting up processes. And the mission is still the same. We want sales departments to be more effective and to be as transparent as they can be. Let me introduce you briefly our speakers for today. So we have Bart Omlo, who is Managing Director at Content by Kentico.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Bart. Bart is a senior salesperson who went through various sales roles. Now he's in the MD role. He's managing fast-growing company, more than 100 employees, and growing 100% year over year. Have an amazing sales team that is spread around the globe, and they are also on the journey right now to get the sales team to 30 people at least, I guess. The other speaker is Arnaud Simray, who is with Tatum right now. What is impressive about Tatum, about Arnaud, is that he also went through various sales roles. Then he get into the VP of sales, and under his management, the organization he worked for went from 1 million ARR to 15 million ARR. Then once Arnold finished at that organization, he said, probably let's do it again, and that's how he got into the Tatum, where he's exactly in front of the same challenge. Okay, guys. So Bart, I guess you can take over the screen. Oh yeah, sorry. Here's the short agenda. So we just went through the introduction. Now I will pass the word to Bart Omlo, who will have his speech for 10 to 20 minutes. Then there is Arno, who will also discuss how from zero ARR to 30 million ARR, and altogether afterwards we'll have a panel discussion into which you can also join, asking the questions, which will take roughly till 7 p.m. By the way, a little bit of control here in with the Google Hangouts. You can see this little triangle, square, and circle. There you can get into the polls, which we will run during the webinar, so then you can answer the questions we'll ask you, and also you can ask some questions that you would like speakers to answer, or there's also an option, if somebody asks the questions, you can put a like on it, so that means the question with the most likes or most thumbs ups will be the most relevant, and so it will get the highest probability that it will be answered. Okay, cool.
So thank you, Jacob. Let's see if I'm able to share the screen in a good way.
Yep.
And that it all works. So I'm going to allow my screen share. Here we go. So which screen? It's always a question which of the screens I'm now sharing, because there are actually two. I assume it's the browser screen now. So let me quickly switch over to the presentation, because then we are sharing the right thing here. It's always a nice, interesting combined challenge. If you give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
So now you see this, and now let's see if you're able to see the presentation.
We're there.
Yes, is that correct? Perfect.
Yep.
And now it's still a question whether you get the whole screen, because now I think you're still getting part of the screen. But let's
exactly.
see it again. Yeah, hold on for a second. We'll reshare it. Give me 1 moment.
No worries, we get to that.
Yeah, that's always I'm normally using. Let's say here we go, and now let's see if I'm able to put it on the complete screen. Here we go. And now the question is, what are you seeing now? Jumping between two screens. That's not a perfect solution. Here we go.
Now we see the. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you, Jacob, to share it if it doesn't work out. So, are you now able to see the presentation, or still not? So, can you share it, Jacob? I think that's easier. And then I'll ask you to click when needed. I think that's easiest.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it this way. Give me a sec.
Yeah. No worries. I have it easy, Jacob. I don't have so many clicks. Yeah, this is perfect. So I'll tell you when to click. Okay. So hello everybody. Thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Bart Omlo, calling in from the Netherlands, and I would at least use the upcoming 15 to 20 minutes to tell a little bit about our journey at Content by Kentico, from startup to mature company, and what it meant for our sales organization. I will use our 3, what I would call evolution phases we passed, to share some lessons learned and thoughts about things you need to think about when growing as an organization, especially around sales. And let me start with a short description of the journey we had from the beginning of 2015 to present day. And probably Jacob, if you can move on to the next. So to give you a brief overview, so Content was started as an internal innovation startup within Kentico, a Czech originated software company providing content management systems for mid to enterprise market clients from all over the world. And we realized that the existing product was serving its purpose, but that we needed to do something new to stay relevant in the quick changing market, which the content management space really is. The internal startup, which we started in 2015, was pretty quickly able to create a market-ready solution, which was put in the market in 2016 under the name Kentico Draft. And our organization was growing from a small 5-people innovation team at that time to some 15 to 20 dedicated employees working on the new product. And this included one dedicated sales manager that was getting our first clients. And to put it a bit in perspective, we're currently around 130 people in our division. In 2017, we moved on and we relaunched the product under the name Kentico Cloud and made it part of the offering the existing sales team, so that Kentico sales team was selling globally to their clients. So we pushed this forward in 2018 and 19, and at least managed to build a strong traction with our product and also get some market recognition. And so you could say at that time we moved slowly from startup to a more scale-up type organization. Still very opportunity driven and flexible, but following some existing processes that were already in place in the company. At the end of 2019, we realized that our product, which was again rebranded in September, people didn't really get Kentico, and we were Kentico, and it was Kentico Cloud, and that was a bit confusing. So we rebranded it again in September that year to Content. And we also realized that our product was serving a different type of client with a different value proposition as the old product did. And we decided to split our organization into 2 divisions with their own sales, their own marketing, customer success and development organization. And this was also the moment I took the role as managing director for the content division within Kentico. And we also concluded that it was time to, let's say, roll the snowball really down the mountain and really get some accelerated growth for the product that we actually had. If you look at the last years, we really managed to double our growth. Jacob was already saying it, and started playing a more significant role in the enterprise headless content management space. And this year, we also realized that it was time to move more from a scale-up approach to a mature organization more, which for our sales team we did together with SalesDoc. That's also one of the reasons why we're joining the webinar. So you could say Content by Kentico is moving into another phase, and we had a pretty interesting ride, and I would like to share some of the experiences we had from the past 7 years. So if you can go to the next slide, Jacob. So when you start creating a product, it most of the time starts with a big idea first. You can click on the next one. That really nice big idea is most of the times the starting point. It's related to a trigger from the markets, either some client request or an internal push to create something new. I think all the startups recognize that. And in our example, we saw some new type of content management systems already entering the market, solving some challenges that also our clients were addressing with us already for some time. I think of things like that they wanted to have a SaaS solution, they wanted to go into the cloud, they wanted to have an easy way to publish content to channels that were appearing rapidly. As we were used to allocate time for innovation, we decided to create a small team to come up with a solution which could potentially create a disruption in the market. You could say that was our big idea. And as soon as the product was ready, there was really a big sense of urgency to test the water for a new solution. So our one and only dedicated sales manager I already talked about was really actively selling and pushing the product to anybody who was interested, which generated actually at the beginning a nice group of new clients with also very different use cases. So you could say so far so good. We broadened our approach, relaunched our product under a new name, and involved the whole sales organization in the selling process. So you could say at that time we went from that startup to that scale up and started running. And here we actually get a bit to the first point, and you can click on the next slide. Because this is, well, no, go back one. Because this is actually where it started to get a bit more complicated for us. What we saw that there were various different groups of clients. There were organizations that were using content to solve some technical challenge. We had like a Banco Santander, really a large global bank. They only spent $300 a month to use our product, really to power their chatbot. And we had companies that selected content as some kind of a migration tool to go from one enterprise content management system to the other. So they wanted to spend some money, but only for a short time. And we also, at the same time, had customers that were really using it as their strategic content management solution to enable them to manage large amounts of content globally. So you could say, in a nutshell, our marketing and sales organization was really running around to sell the product, but there wasn't really a clear direction. And you can imagine that the three client use cases I just mentioned all have a very different approach to the way how you do your messaging, your pricing strategy, your sales tactics, etc., etc. Not to even mention the development of new functionality that you want to do. What we then really decided that it was time to go back to the drawing board and at least start with our first, I would say, really clear lessons learned that we had, was to really, from after that first running phase, to start being much more clear on what is our ideal client profile. And this not only created more clarity on the messaging and the sales story, but it also allowed the whole organization to be more aware of our clients and how we needed to move forward. And I would say that the challenge in this phase is in a sense not to create this new good story for clients or create your ideal client profile, but it's more important to understand from which clients you're actually moving away from. Because in the beginning with the startup, you get all these opportunities in different cases. But of course, if you, let's say, start to pick an ideal client, there's also some clients that you are moving away from, as I already said. And of course, we did it with a soft landing, but trying to match all business cases just doesn't bring you further, not from a company perspective, but also definitely not from a sales perspective. And one extra thing I wanted to mention about is if you do that, then please don't be afraid to be very narrow when you define your ideal client profile. I would say that what we really learned is the better the ICP really fits your strengths, the better you're also able to sell it and win over your competitors, better than if you just try to conquer everything. So that was the first, I would say, big lesson. So now you can click on the next slide, Jacob. So the second thing that for us was important is that even when you're able to define that ideal client profile, there's still a positive risk that you want to conquer the world right away. You want to obviously move on. You're in that like winning mode. And with the split of the divisions, we immediately had the luxury to have a small global sales team. We had partners all over the world. We had a nice client base. And so even in our loosely structured approach, with everybody being very result oriented, we spent all our time on chasing new opportunities, but you could say we had a little bit less focus on our process. And for us, the good thing was it resulted in great growth. As Jacob already said, we really managed to grow 100% year over year. But we also started to build up a bit of what I would call a pile of future challenges, or from a technical perspective, they would call it technical debt. I don't know if there's a word for that in sales, like sales debt or something like it. But let me give you a few examples. One example, for example, if you win enough deals, and if you're in the winning mood, then the typical thing that you don't do so well is a good loss analysis, because sometimes it's considered as not worth the effort. You just let it go. Everybody knows the mindset. You win some, you lose some. But spending some good time analyzing why you do not win some deals, if you do that better, it helps you to collect some data for the future, which we figured out obviously a little bit later. And we really needed to learn that. And the second example I wanted to give is that in our growth plans, we always want to keep investing. And if you are doing that in startup scale-up mode, and I think Arno will probably recognize the same, you always live a little bit on the edge. You want to make sure that you're able to forecast your future a bit, and to see where you're able to create room for investment. And I would say also here, we didn't focus so well on the process, which resulted in a situation where we had in a sense, a very short and somewhat unpredictable sales forecast. And we really needed to change that to also like know where we were going to be able to keep living on that edge, you could say. And lastly, last example I wanted to give is that we needed to ensure that really our whole organization was running in the same direction, and not only with a clearly defined client profile, but also with a story that was really resonating well for all target groups, and that was easy sellable, and changing our messaging with some clear focus. You can click on the next one. That we positioned as this, hey, your content better, faster, and at scale, really helped aligning all the departments, ensuring that what we were selling was also aligned with what we were developing. So you could say, in all cases, all the examples that I gave, it was all about creating focus and creating a mindset where everybody's always asking, like, what should I now stop doing, instead of adding more things to the pile. We needed to get rid of the pile a little bit. But why is that so important? I would say if you really want to move from a scale up to a mature organization, you're obviously scaling up your headcount and marketing investments. And without knowing what the return on investment is of every spent dollar, and having a hard time to predict the sales result, you are unable to really scale your business. So you really need to make sure your foundation is good. And for us, it meant that, especially on our sales process, you can click once, I think your logo is appearing, Jacob. We really needed to take some steps forward. And that's where we also really realized that we needed to do something, and where we also involved SalesDoc into the mix. If you are pushing towards a more like strict process, which we needed, and for us it was also important, and that's another lessons learned, is that we really needed to make sure that the senior sales managers also got some buy-in. You can imagine that senior sales managers are not so easy to convince. They know what they do, they created their own habits, they create their own way of working, they're a bit admin adverse, and if they hit the numbers, it's very complicated to make them change their behavior. So what we did with SalesDoc at the beginning was that in the beginning it was really important that we showed them the challenges with their current approach, around the predictability especially, where we really took some opportunities that we had that we saw that were kept pushing forward, or some of them that went dark, and in a bit of a group exercise we let them see the challenge themselves, which really created a good buy-in of all these senior sales managers, that actually changing the process and making it more standard would actually help us to move forward. And what really helped here was that we didn't only talk about, let's say, the people and the process, but we also made sure that our technology was supporting the change. So we immediately involved our revenue operations team that was also, let's say, adopting the change immediately in our Salesforce environment, to make sure that also the change was adopted and people could really work at it. I think you all heard about these three elements of success: people, process, and technology. But we really needed to apply that here to make sure that we kept and continuously kept that acceptance of change, because otherwise we would not be able to do it. The second important step that we did when we created that focus and brought in a more stricter process, that it was that we really needed to re-evaluate our current opportunities and assess whether they were still in the right stage, to ensure that we were able to better see how we were doing in certain regions. For us, what was really interesting is that this optimization really allowed us to get a better understanding of our opportunities and challenges in certain areas, in certain parts of the market. What also enabled us to really tailor our approach, put the dollars in the right market, in the right vertical, and really ensured that we did not only create predictable sales engine, but it was also much more easy to scale our business from that perspective. So you could say, by creating more focus and enforcing a stricter process, we really prepared ourselves for the next step in our growth, to become a more, I would say, mature organization. And let me add one extra advice before we go to the next slide. For me, it's really important to keep evaluating the way of working. It's not like a one-off action that you do. It's very typical, obviously, that when you put the pressure up and when you want to get the results even better, it's also very natural for salespeople to go back a bit in their old habits. So if you want to be ready for your sustainable growth, you really need to continuously assess and evaluate your sales process, your opportunities, and keep addressing that same situation. That makes it scalable. So one last thing I wanted to share today, before passing it over to Arnoud, is a bit our journey towards then taking it from scale up to then a more mature organization. And I would say from our perspective, you could click on the next slide, Jacob. It was really around our go-to-market strategy. You could say after our launch at the beginning, we had very successful years, and we noticed that we were really able to generate a lot of direct inbound leads. Website visitors and inquiries increased rapidly because of our new product. The market was changing. There was a growing market adoption. So we spent a lot of effort to build a thought leadership position in the headless CMS market. You can click on the next, Jacob. So in the past years, and we still do that, we didn't stop, but we especially in the phase of startup scale up, we produce huge amounts of attractive content. Marketing research on the state of the market, ebooks around headless CMS adoption, blogs addressing specific topics or target groups. And we did, for example, a Marketeers Love blog series, and also some webinars with lessons learned and new releases. And these pieces of content created a big traction on the inbound business inquiries and really helped us to move the business forward a lot. It was like very easy. But what happens then to your sales organization when they don't really have to fight for the new leads, or but they can start cherry picking on opportunities, and they are still making their target. So what then happens is that in a sense they get a bit lazy, and you can click on the next slide. I even took a picture of that. You don't really have to be on top of the market and the leads. That's at least what I had the feeling a little bit, that our senior guys didn't really have to be on top of their skill set. It was in a sense a bit too easy. And the challenge for high-performing organization is then that you're able to really push that snowball that you were able to create really down the mountain and get that traction. But when you want to keep that in the long run, it's obviously more complicated. And everybody knows that creating the growth is one, but keeping it at a high level for many years, that is much more demanding. And that's also a bit something we saw in our organization. I'm not saying that our salespeople are lazy at all. But what we saw is that they were not used to scan the market actively or actively work with the local partners and to build a pipeline. We were very focused on that inbound lead generation and realized that we really needed to ensure that our generated leads are not setting the growth, but that the ability to create our own pipeline, the future, that specific proactive approach really puts us more in the driver's seat of our own results. And that obviously helps us to keep growing at a high pace also in the long run. So you could say in a nutshell, adding a more proactive outbound business development representative organization as part of our marketing and sales engine, I believe really is also crucial to go from that step from scale up, and some organizations already do a little bit earlier. But for us, it now really is the moment also to really get that as part of the engine also running, because I really believe that it will help any organization to keep momentum in transforming from that scale up into a more sustainable and mature organization. There's always a discussion then whether it's better to have your own BDRs or whether you get them from an external specialized agency. I can't really answer that at the moment. You can click on the next slide, by the way. It's more motivating than the sleeping sales guy. But I really believe that it's more related to the ability to integrate an external organization into your sales process and team, and that probably is more different for every organization. So some organizations will go to have their own. Some organizations are perfectly fine with an external organization to do it. I would say we'll see how that evolves with our organization. I started moving a little bit. So I really hope that my story about the journey we've made in content by Kentico gave you some tips and tricks and lessons learned we experienced. You can click on the next slide, by the way. So I would say that we are somewhere at the beginning of being a mature organization. I still think that we are learning a lot on a day-to-day basis. I just wanted to share a couple of them. Yeah, and what is then really our ultimate goal? You can click on it. Well, I think that's the same for all organizations that are in this high growth pace. Obviously, we want to conquer the world and win the first prize and things like that. But to be really honest, for us, it's really important that we are growing into a mature company with really happy clients and happy partners. They drive our business, but also happy employees that really, let's say, also drive the business forward, because we really believe at Content that we are making the future together, and then the results will follow by itself when you do at least a bit of the tips and tricks that I gave. So that was it from my side, Jacob. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you as well.
And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and we'll get to that at the panel for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for moderating it. Cool. So thank you very much, Bart, for the impressive speech or talk. And let's move to, oh yeah, big thank you, Bart. And let's again, here is a little bit pop-up. If you, as Bart said, if there's any question, you can still just put it into the chat, ask question. We'll vote for it. And I'm handing over the word to Arno.
Hey, thank you, Jacob, and yeah, congrats and great job to Bart. Even I learn a lot. You know, we learn every day from everybody's journey in sales roles. So very impressive what you have built and what you continue to build with your organization. I'm going to share my screen. So let me know if Jacob, you can give me a thumbs up to see if it works properly.
Absolutely.
Oh, it sounds like I'm.
Let's see if you'll be more successful than Bart. If not, then I'm the main clicker here.
Yeah, it sounds like I don't have. You might be up for another round to share then.
Okay, no worries. So let's go for it then.
I just wanted to say that I was able to make it work, but it was much more fun to let Jacob press the button. So.
Well, you know, like it's what sell is about. You walk in a demo one day, you know, the screen is not working, you don't have the right cable, you know, something happens. So you have to improvise or at least think quick on your feet. So it's part of our, you know, part of our journey. Exactly. So thank you, Jacob. I'll give you a quick nod when we need to go to the next slide. But thanks for having me. First of all, thank you for the Sales Doc team. You guys are doing a fantastic job. My name is Arno Simre. I'm currently the head of sales for a tech startup called Tatum. Tatum is actually headquartered here in Miami, Florida. That's where I'm based. But most of our roots are actually in Czech Republic. We're very proud of it, in a city that I had the chance to visit for the first time called Brno. Probably not new for a lot of people on this audience, but new for me. So we have our founders are out there. They did an amazing product. So we are a blockchain development platform. So we are in the Web3 blockchain industry. But most of my career, you know, in the last 15 years, I've basically and proudly sell software. My story hasn't been a straight line, so to speak. You know, I've probably held every single position in the sales organization. I'm a computer science engineer by trade. So yes, I'm a geek. I started more as a solution engineer and pre-sale, and then move on to what was called, I guess back in the days, it was not called like this, but what is SDR today. So making, you know, 100 cold calls in the bullpen with the guys and having a lot of fun at it. And then slowly move on to an individual contributor, sales managers. And now I've been fortunate now to join Tatum just 2 months ago to build this amazing startup from scratch from a commercial perspective. In the previous role, as Bart mentioned, you know, I've gone through that building from 0 to 5 million, from 5 to 10, from 10 to 30, and so on. And Bart was so good to explain through his journey, like definitely a different type of this organization. What I want to touch on myself today is 2 things. The first thing, and probably where I'm going to focus the most, is around the people, and specifically hiring, coaching, retaining top talents. And I'm going to focus actually primarily around hiring. I don't think it is a part that people talk enough when we talk about growing an organization, building an organization. If you link at some of the amazing content, for example, I see every day on LinkedIn, it's definitely a lot about processes, tools, and things that are extremely crucial. Don't get me wrong. Bart was talking about what I call the PPT, right? It's not the PowerPoint, it's the people, process, and technology, as you see here on this slide. But I want to focus a bit more on the hiring and then tell you a little bit in my last startup, what was our experience moving from mid-market to enterprise? What does that mean? What are some of the lessons? Because to me, that's the key once you want to move fairly small team organization to that repeatable motion as Jacob mentioned. So Jacob, if you want to go to the next slide, I want to talk about hiring. I've been fortunate to be coached by some of the most greatest sales leaders in the world. They're actually right now the CRO of many SaaS businesses, startup, many names that you know, most likely US-based companies. And very early on, they were telling me that if you want to become a great sales leader, we are in the people business at some points. Yes, we're going to talk about process, technology, and many other things. But that component, I think, is quite underestimated. And hiring A players should be 30, if not 50% of your focus. Whether you're a first line manager and it's a big part of what you do, or you might be a second line manager, or maybe a head of sale, or whatever that hierarchy might be. But I've come up with what I call the 5 golden attributes to identify who are your reps that are going to be, really going to build a successful organization with them. Specifically, I'm talking a little bit more here when you are in that scale up phase, right? We are past product market fit, we're past, obviously Google spreadsheet or some early days of building some processes. And I want to talk about those 5 attributes. So hopefully, if you are hiring, if you are looking for people, you can maybe reuse some of this playbook that has proven to be successful. The first one is growth mindset. And I think this is a term that probably is being thrown left and right and everywhere in content. Growth mindset is actually something very specific. Growth mindset is the idea that talents are not born, they are made. And it's the idea that your rep needs to have, and needs to believe, I should say, in the fact that they're going to learn as they grow, and that you're going to be able to coach them. I always say I prefer to have an amazing rep that can coach versus maybe a rep that's a little bit better, maybe with even a better track record, but that's not going to be coachable. That's, to me, is the most important thing in the world, and the first thing that I look. And someone who's actually going to embrace training as well, right? Most of the most successful rep that I've coached, they love to train. They love to come to practice. They love to spend 5 hours preparing before a pitch. That's what a good rep looks like. If they don't have a growth mindset, they shouldn't be part of your organization. Next one. The second one is what I call intelligence. Again, a very broad concept. People talk about being book smart, EQ, IQ. There's all these attributes that I think we all like to use, and we all probably look for when we interview with potential new enterprise or regular account executive. For me, it's something very specific. And I like this quote about Tom Brady. If you guys are familiar, very famous quarterback here in the States. But what's happening when you play American football, right? Not like soccer, is that when you are at the line of scrimmage, you have a plan. You have everything. You've been practicing for a week. And as you're about to start the play, the defense change, and you have about 5 seconds to adapt to what's happening. And that's really, we were just talking and joking about the issue we had with the system. That's what sell is about. It's not about improvising. It's about audible ready and having the ability to think critically. And if you want to grow your organization, if you want your rep to start closing bigger deal, they need to be audible ready. They need to be curious. They need to be critical thinkers. They're going to be thrown at different companies, businesses, and they need to understand those businesses very well from the outside in. And this takes a lot of skills, and you need to identify those skills during the interview process. And that's the second thing that I always look for. The third one, if you want to jump, Jacob, is culture fit. I'll probably be brief because this is going to mean so many different things for many of you. What is my culture? How do we fit? So obviously, this will be different for the companies that you might be with right now. But generally speaking, I love this quote from Dave Carnegie, because good people attract good people, right? And you'll see most likely that your best rep are the rep that actually help other reps. Don't get me wrong, sales rep are a little bit of this lone wolf to some extent. and they like to be on their own and managing their pipeline and closing deal. But at the same time, the best players that I've ever had are the ones that are going to support you with other reps, and they actually welcome other players to come and help when they face challenges in an opportunity. So that's the third one. The fourth one, Jacob, if you want to move, is execution with discipline. The biggest thing, and I'll talk to it in a second when I talk about one specific experience that I had, was once you start moving towards the enterprise, you need to be extremely structured, and you need people that believe in accountability and extreme ownership, right? That is literally the difference between what I would say average performer and high performer. Every high performer in any organization that I've been part of has processes. They have routines. They can tell you exactly how they prep for a first demo. They can tell you exactly what's their process for a follow-up. They can be very specific about it, and they feel a very strong sense of accountability. And this is one thing you need to look for. If you are in your journey to get to past $5 million, trying to get after some of the whales in your industry, what might be, your reps needs to have those skills, else you won't be able to close true, multi-million-dollar deals whatsoever. And then the last one, Jacob, if you want to move, is competitiveness. Again, maybe a term that's used very broadly, but competition pushes individuals, teams, and organization. And if someone is not willing to fight everywhere, and that's really like that person should hit defeat, whatever defeat or loss might be, you should not even consider them to be part of your team. Because as you build those great processes, as you go through the journey, just like Bart was sharing, you need the right individuals that are going to push other people in your organization to win every day. And if you want to hit the next one, just to conclude on this topic, I don't think people are talking enough about this. Jacob, if you want to go to the next one. Yeah, perfect. So those are the 5 attributes, and it might look simple like this, but I can tell you, I spent years codifying, looking at what are the questions that I should be asking in interviews to identify those set of skills. How do I test people in interviews? How do I look for resumes and LinkedIn profile? And I can guarantee you that those attributes, knock on wood, haven't really let me down, and has been proven by some of my mentors as well when it comes to bringing, truly a player, a rep to your organization. And we can talk about it during the QA if you have any question as far as hiring. And we can talk about, coaching and retaining, which is a completely different approach, but it does start with hiring. I don't know if there is some hiring managers in the room, but I don't need to tell you that there's a fierce competition these days. It was the case pre-COVID, even more so. You have people moving from different companies. There is a salary battles. You have more actually tech companies growing. You have, and I can speak for experience now, blockchain companies going after more like SaaS Web 2 talents as well. So having a specific strategy to look, what are you looking for in the reps? How do you identify them? How do you go after them, and how you bring them on board should be 30%, if not more, of your time as a sales leader. Next one, Jacob. How are we doing on time? Are we good? Can you give me a check if I'm running late?
No, you're still okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So I talk about hiring. It's really something that I'm very passionate about as a sales leader. And quite frankly, it's a set of skills that I learned towards the later stage of my sales leadership path. But one of the things that I want to talk about now is the enterprise. And I think that was the big differentiator in my previous startup prior to joining Tatum. We were at that time a Series B. We were doing about, just $1 million, so to speak, more or less. And we were very good at what I would consider the mid-market, right? Our ACV was around 75, 100, 150, maybe 175K average deal cycle. But we were struggling to get to the, for us, 250K USD ARR was a big deal. But we were really struggling to get to like 300K, 500K, 750, $1 million. And that's really the biggest thing that as a sales leader, I focus with my CEO on cracking. And it'll take hours and many books to talk about what has been our journey, but I just want to give you a couple of very quick learning from that, and we can probably continue that in the Q&A. Jacob, if you want to go to the next one. The first, I would say, mistake or misconception that we were considering is what is truly enterprise, right? I think everybody would consider it's like, you know, big companies, big deal, whatever it is. But people kind of loosely define that term, and I think that has a negative impact on how your go-to-market works. For us, we were looking at number of employees, maybe number of total volume of sales or market cap of a company, which is, generally speaking, some metrics that is being used by every sales leader to define what enterprise is. What we were missing is that the size of a company for us at that time, we were selling an AI and machine learning solution, SaaS software, was not necessarily translating to the same ARR. In other words, we were going after what we thought were very large company, things about Carrefour, you know, BP maybe in Europe, but maybe the deal size that was emerged from that was like 200K, and that there were other type of company that might be a bit smaller in size, but that the deal size was actually more aligned with 500, 600, 750K from a first deal. So the first thing we work on is redefine our territory segmentation and understanding much, much better our TAM. The TAM was very easy to define where we were in the mid-market segment. It actually changed drastically when we moved to the enterprise. The second thing that was probably also is our process was actually not adapt to sell to enterprise customer. And by enterprise, I do want to say, I'm talking about Wales enterprise. I'm not talking about a 200K deal. I'm talking about a 700K deal and higher. And again, I'm an engineer, so you see that my style of thinking about sales organization is very much just like an engineer. We broke apart and we look at every pieces in our process. And the biggest thing that I noticed in reflecting on previous experience, it was kind of the same. If you want to win in the enterprise, you actually have to slow down in the first, whatever your stages might be, in the first half of your sales cycle, and speed up in the second half of the sales cycle. And the reason why it was hard for us is coming from the mid-market, so coming from a bottoms up, we had a higher velocity. You know, for us, it was a 3 to 6 month. And now we were 6 month to 12 to 18 month cycle. And we wanted to go too fast in those early stages, whatever it might be. And what are those first meetings look like? I'm not just talking first demo, by the way. I'm talking about what does the first 60 days looks like, 90 days with the customer. So we reshape our entire sales process, really pushing some of the key milestones in our process to the second half of the sales cycle, focusing a lot more on discovery, creating, you know, business value assessment, and a lot of tools. And how do we engage with a customer in a very different way? And one thing that we also learned from selling to enterprise, and we moved the ACV from 125K to 350K in average. That's a big difference, right? That's 200K, but we're talking average here. It means that all your deals are now almost $500,000, right? To get that average up. And the thing that we realize, it's all about selling to people, right? And what I mean with that is we find a way, and we call it the 1-3-5 rules, is that we will look at an organization. It doesn't matter who they are, if it's a gas industry, if it's a retailers, if it's a tech companies. We needed to be able to understand the whole organization. And we built account mapping, which I'm sure everybody is using, but to an extreme that it would be a 20, 30 pages booklet, which is very similar to what maybe a Goldman Sachs analyst would do when they look through a company. And by doing that, we were targeting one executive, which was typically myself or our CEO. We would have our rep targeting 3 people, and then we would have our sales engineers or another people in the company target 5 people. The reason for that is we realize if we don't have 9 people that are influencer or supportive of a deal, we were not able to close an enterprise deal, which is, north of 750K US dollars. And that was also a big takeaway. What we did is everybody has a different style. But as Bart mentioned, once you become more mature and once you start to scale, you have to codify everything. And that's another learning of moving from mid-market to enterprise, is everything you do as a sales leader, you need to invest the time to step back from maybe a good learning, a good momentum or motions that you have found, put things in writing, templatize, testing again across your rep, and make sure that the next rep that comes on board is able to leverage everything you have learned pretty much from day one. And that's also the big thing that we were learning, is we had a couple of good reps, most likely people who have been on board for 2 or 3 years, that were able to close that $1 million deal. But the new one were struggling. They had the same mistake or the same healthy challenge to get stuck at like 150, 200K. And by developing this new playbook and codify everything we do a little bit more military style, I'm not going to lie, this allowed the new enterprise rep to ramp up quicker and for them to get truly like big deal under their belt after 3 quarters, basically, right? It's take about 9 months in the best case scenario. So that was another big takeaways from us to win the enterprise world. The last one, is PG, pipeline generation. I think to me, this is talking about mindset. Bart was talking about SDR. Do we do this in-house? Do you outsource? For me, it's really something that to win the enterprise world and even to scale, right, to I would say north of 15 million in ARR, you need the entire company to be behind pipeline generation. What we mean by that, it's outside of the functions that's kind of their job, SDR, BD, and other functions. Every AE, for example, in our previous company, had to generate about 15 to 20% of their entire pipeline by themselves. It was not a rule, it was mandatory. And then even at the company level, we had PG Blast Day, where literally people that work even in HR and either some other functions, maybe put aside a few devs and data ops that didn't want to, necessarily partake into that. But we had Blitz Day. And I can tell you that the increase in pipeline or lead creation that we had, and it just creates such a healthy, competitive spirit across the company. At that time, we were 50 people, so it's fairly manageable. If you are 500 people, the return is a bit different. But that pipeline generation from a culture perspective, if you are in the SaaS business, obviously I'm biased, but I would say your sales organization is arguably one of the top 3 division in the team. But you want to make sure everybody is supporting that sales motion. And the last part, because I'm probably a little bit over time here, is I want to quickly talk about vendor risk assessment. It's not very cute to talk about it. You probably have been through those questionnaires from companies about your security. How do you do this procedure? How do you delete data? It's basically, if you guys are not familiar, it's the process that you go through typically in the later stage of your enterprise sales cycle to make sure you check all the boxes for the future client. It is quite often a part that is being looked as an admin. It's not my job. Someone in the company, our CTO or CISO needs to do that. I would just say, I've lost deal myself as an IC or as a leader because we were not prepared to go through what is a multiple weeks exercise to make sure we are the vendor of choice for those very large company. And I can talk about it if there is question, but I would say if you're not familiar with vendor risk assessment, if you've done, a couple of simple Q&A in your RFP or maybe in your proposal, that's great. But if you want to truly sell to the Fortune 50, that process needs to become a process in your sales cycle, not just some of legal paper process that just happened and you just to go through the flow. And again, it was a big, painful experience. And if you want to go to the last slide here, I know I was a little bit all over the place with some of the stories, but hopefully takeaways and failures is more interesting to learn. I want to also give you away with some of the books that I have all of my reps reading when they join with me. I talk about growth mindset. The first book is obviously a very famous one. I think many people will recognize that. The second one is called 4DX. It's actually a technique for anybody, not just salespeople, to go after a very specific goal. And it's more like tactic on how to manage what's actually important. The third book is around extreme ownership. It's done by Joko Willink, which is a very iconic Navy SEAL Team 6. It talks about as a leader, not just as a sales leader, how to lead an organization. And then The Qualified Sales Leader, also a very famous book by John McMahon. John McMahon was, kind of a leader behind PTC, BMC, Blade Logics. And most of the people who have been part of those companies, there's a great podcast, if you've never heard of it, it's called the 33 CXO, which is pretty much only CROs. Some of my mentors are on this podcast. Those are people, the CRO for MongoDB, Less Work, Sprinkler, Fuse, are kind of part of the same group of people. It's 33 episodes. It's pretty cool. Whether you're already managing 100 people or you're managing 3 reps, a lot of takeaways from this cool podcast that I think is always good to share. So a couple of knowledge here for you and resources. And I guess we can now see if there's question. Jacob, what's next for us?
Okay, so thank you very much, Arnaud, for sharing your know-how. I'm also, which I leave for the panel discussion afterwards. Also, I would be very curious how you test during the onboarding process or hiring process, actually, intelligence and coachability, because this is I would actually sign all the 5 which you have done. I think me personally, I named like 3 of them which I follow, but you extended to 5. That's really cool. Okay, so guys, give me a second and let's we'll slowly get to our panel discussions. Yeah, Bart.
Yeah, turn on the sound, so I hope I'm not echoing here too much. Otherwise, I'll turn it off. Great presentation, Arnaud. I really liked it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, I think you can then afterwards continue also in the discussions once you meet both in Brno, because you both are from other countries, but travel to Brno.
So it's foreigners in Brno. I figure out I've been so many times in Brno that I know the town in some areas better than the locals, so that's always fun.
Cool. So I just check how many questions we got here from the public. Yeah, there are quite some to answer. So guys, right now after the presentations, if there's something on your mind of what was not covered that you would like to know a little bit deeper, or more information about particular topic, just feel free to write it down. We'll go through all of them. If they also make sense, so that it's not some very random question. Right now we'll cover the panel discussion, which will have three aspects. I would say 3 general topics. One of them is sales organization. The other one we'll be discussing is strategy, how to define to which market to go and how to approach the market. The never-ending discussion, especially in this phase, like whether we should focus rather on channel or on direct sales, and also about processes and technologies, because it's not just about the salespeople in house, but it's also about the organization as such has to be ready. The salesperson who is just representing the company at the end of the day is just part of the whole team, which had to prepare the organization. Okay, so gentlemen, so sales organization, and maybe Arno, I will open it up with my question. You mentioned the 5 rules. So how do you actually test the coachability and intelligence growth mindset? What are the questions or techniques you use? And then also, Bart, if you can add to the discussion.
Yeah, so like I said, like those are obviously attributes that, just like you said, and I'm sure Bart, he would either agree or have a similar set of rules. So it's not like rocket science, but against the engineer in me, try to codify all of that, right? So I can actually identify these during interviews with specific questions. I'll give you a couple of examples maybe to outline that. So growth mindset for me is all around coaching, right? So the way you kind of test that maybe in interviews is about, you can do a couple of things. You can explore past successes and failure with a candidate. And it doesn't actually matter what they tell you, like if they're trying to look good and, usual, like, I was a failure, but I kind of succeed at the end. It's more like, how do they approach talking about those failure, right? Like, how do they share it with you? And also you ask them about coaching style, right? If you tell them like, how do you like to be coached? What is your coaching sessions with your current managers? If the person is probably, doesn't have a good answer, but doesn't have specifics. In other words, there is no coaching sort of relationship with their current direct managers. Either their manager sucks, or it's not part of their mindset to be coached and just to train in general, right? And that's what the growth mindset is. If training is not part of normal, just like, I do a lot of analogy with sports, right? People show up to practice. You have people who show up to practice because they kind of have to, because, okay, like coach asked me to come Monday for Friday to be ready for, but you have people that show up an hour before because they realize this is in training, in practices that you become better. So if you ask them like, what is your coaching style? How do you practice? How do you train? You understand if they have actually that growth mindset. So I think those are the things that I would explore too. I think that was the first one you asked me about. How do you test growth mindset? I can go through all the 5, but that, I don't want to spend too much time. And Bart, maybe you can share a little bit on your side, like some of your attributes, perhaps.
Yeah, I would. I really like the way how you describe those 5 elements. How I always look at it when I recruit people, or how I look also at how they perform and the skill set, apart from the hard results. But I, in a sense, always put it into 3 segments. So you have you could say the experience. What did they do? What's their ability to sell? How do they sell? That's one part of the story. Important, but teachable, and obviously they get more experience. So experience. Then the knowledge, exactly what you're saying. Do they have a certain hunger to learn? What did they already learn? So what do they bring in their backpack? And what like are we able to fill in their backpack? So what's their growth potential? And you need a certain hunger for that, obviously. But for me, actually, the most important part is the 3rd pillar, which is, I would call like the soft skills, or the soft side, or the personal skills. You talked about cultural fit. I don't see a salesperson operating in an organization, at least not in our organization, that doesn't fit the culture. Because they can be such a good salesperson, but I think you made a last point, especially when you come to enterprise sales, it's the whole organization that drives it forward. It's everybody that needs to have the belief, but it also automatically means, and one good example is like, if our developers are in a mindset, and they for example are very aware of when they release something, what is the contribution to the sales, how does it create opportunities. So obviously when they do that and put all their energy, time into that, and to also be quickly on the release, they want to have the trust in that sales and marketing person that they are actually also able to sell, that they believe in it, that they're able to talk it, that they listen to the feedback. So I think no matter how big you are, and of course the bigger you get, the more complicated it gets, but you need to create that cultural fit and that belief that you're all running for the same goal. So that, for me, that really is the most important one. As soon as I start missing that spirit, or if I don't feel that spirit in a like a conversation with a new hire, I would not hire them, because this is something you can't train. It's there or it's not there. Sometimes obviously you need to light the spark a little bit with certain people, but then really quickly they need to find the spark, and otherwise it will not work. They will not follow you in the long run. That's at least how I look at it.
Mm. Cool.
Agreed.
Yep. Thank you for that. By the way, here a little bit of our way how we also test the candidates on the yeah, maybe understanding of the topic, which is also aligned with intelligence and coachability, or growth mindset. We replicated, I think it was written in the sales acceleration formula by Mark Roberge in from HubSpot. So we get a person on interview. Before that, we send them the task. Hey, get prepared for the interview. We're gonna do role play, and you're selling this random software to us. And for instance, we're HR, and you're selling us onboarding software. And so we want first thing we look at is how do they understand this topic? Did they make research? Do they have some logical analysis in it? And the other thing is if they don't go through the not that many people makes the role play like perfectly, and but it's not that they didn't want to do that, it's just they've done the best they could do. So then we give feedback and say, okay, does it make sense to you? And if it does, then say, okay, let's do it once again the next day, and then we measure the progress. Did they improve in the skills we told them, or was it pretty much the same? And this is for us more important, the difference which is actually between the first and second round than if the first round is totally perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
Testing.
on.
No, I was saying testing is very important. Like depending on which side of our organization, you might include a role play more than a test, I should say, in your practice. We do have we not at Tatum because we were more on the early stage, but at other ones we've done like role play like you, or if you hire like a first line managers, you kind of do a role play from a coaching perspective, right? How people would coach a rep. So I would play a rep, and the maybe the director of sales or whatever sales manager would coach me on an opportunity. So we would send an opportunity in advance, some like where we are, where I'm stuck, and I would play the rep, and I would be like, oh, I did everything I could, whatever. And the future, sales manager would kind of like obviously get into the role play of how he would approach the coaching part of it. So I think what you're doing is fantastic in your process as well to with a role play. I really like the idea of the 2 days actually to identify the delta.
And get your let's say the peers that will work with this person, get them also to do the interview. Don't forget it. Like don't do it like only top down, because for me it's pretty simple measurement. If the peers don't like the person, and I'm making it very simple now, but if there's no like click, then I always think like, okay, first of all, how would it work? Because they also need to learn and share experiences, but also how would that then work in a sales situation where they also in a sense need to be so flexible to mold their behavior so that in a sense they always create the click, which is important. It's people business.
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way, yeah, since we're discussing this topic, also we touched the coaching. There's also one of the questions, and there's more afterwards. So once you get the salespeople into the company, so we went successfully through the recruitment process, and this one is for you, Arno. How often the coaching takes place in the organization, like which you managed?
Yeah, so I would say it happens all the time, right? There's just different type of coaching, different channels, and it depends if you ask if you are first line manager, second line managers, that type would change. I would say generally speaking, if you think about a first line manager, so you are managing reps directly. I think weekly sessions to me, like you can't manage more than 6 reps. Like first of all, it's 4 to 6 max. If you manage more than 6 reps, then you need a team lead. So it is manageable. And I would say that would be on the weekly basis, right? Your weekly one-on-one are not to talk about pipeline and not to talk about this. This is to focus on your rep and helping them unlock their potential, whether it might be within an opportunity or within like other set of skills. And what I did specifically is we put like a sales enablement plan for them, meaning that we identify typically one area that we jointly agreed that there is an area and an opportunity for them to grow. And we fix a small objective. We like to keep it at 1 month so it doesn't feel like this kind of like long 6 month like projects, because you lose the rep. Like he's like, okay, like what is this? But one specific thing. So whether it's, I'm not getting my conversion from first demo to second meeting, or whether like I'm struggling to go maybe higher up in the organization, I'm always stuck. So it's one thing very specific. we now remove and identify, is it, I always call it, is it will or skill, right? Is it a will reason why you're not accomplishing what you want, or is it a skill reason? And based on that, we develop a very simple coaching plan, typically 1 month. So it's 4 sessions during the one-on-one, where we say, okay, next week you're going to be working on this. And the reason why I says this also happen every time, and now through a lot of fantastic tech stack like Gong, I can listen to Gong like when I'm running at night, and I just like, tag people and send them a couple like, hey, this is like what I'm thinking, what do you think, etc. I'm just saying Gong, but there's tons of other obviously way to coach. What I'm saying is like, it doesn't just have to happen during that session, so to speak. But yeah, I would say if you're a first line manager, I would say at least once a week for sure. But it has to be a little bit structured too at the same time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing probably to add, what I see works pretty well on our side is that, so we do monthly pipeline reviews, and it's not about the pipeline itself, but we really focus then on, let's say, sharing either like the biggest win, the biggest loss, or the biggest challenge with the whole sales team. It's very interesting challenge when you have a global sales team from Australia to the West Coast. You never will bridge them all together, but the fact that you bring them together, build a bit of a trust relation so that they're pretty openly talking about their challenges that they have in certain opportunities. You see that they learn a lot from each other and also help each other out in parallel where needed. And we have a bit of listening in by the product management team and by customer success. They, in a sense, don't have a role, but they just listen in, ask a question, and you see a lot of like a follow-up and especially learning activities. That's really important.
Absolutely agree. Sometimes I feel like that when we're delivering trainings to very experienced salespeople, the biggest value of us is that they actually met in one room and we facilitate the discussion. It's not about us anymore, and that's how it actually should be. Okay, cool, guys. By the way, when we're talking about a sales team, right now, and that's also for you, how like when the organization is starting and is about to hire the first salespeople and get the traction into it. So, what are the first salespeople you would get into the team? How they should look like? Because once you have everything set and you have 100 salespeople, all the processes is set. It's a little bit easier than at the beginning when you have just 2-3 salespeople which you need to get on the target.
Yeah, like I think that at least what we saw on our side, and I can, let's say, only talk about on our experience, but we had somebody that was like, in a sense, technical enough to understand the product, so was able to take what he learned from the market and bring it back to the product team. So it was a bit of a technical person, but also a very communicative person and very, let's say, with a very high level of hunger to prove that actually, let's say, what the product team created, that were almost a bit like, it was almost one team. That he was not part, our sales manager was not part of let's say, his own little sales department. It actually, he felt more part of the product development team, but he was like their client-facing person, and he was really like, so in the beginning, really at the start, I believe you need somebody like that really is not afraid to just run, pick up the phone, fail. Also, some salespeople don't like to fail, but have an ability to hit his nose 10 times, try new things, and like give a bit of a free roll, not put too strict targets on the person apart from bringing in clients, not in terms of size, but more like different types of clients, so that we also could learn how it developed. That worked a lot for us, and of course that is a situation that works for the first two years, I would say, and then you slowly need to really organize that more structured. You need to grow your sales team, but in the beginning it was really like a runner. There was a runner, and it was literally a runner.
Cool. Yeah, Arno, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think Bart hit on a couple of interesting things. It will obviously depend on the product you sell and obviously the industry, etc. But in my previous company, even Tatum has some I think similarities. Is if the product is highly technical, if I'm thinking blockchain, AI, machine learning, especially also if you sell to tech buyers, I would say generally speaking, versus maybe marketing broad marketing target, so to speak. The capacity to understand the product, maybe understand the industries with a bit more technical experience, perhaps to what you would be needing for a rep maybe 3 years down the line is I think is accurate what Bart was saying in your first hire, so to speak. I think I some of the attributes, by the way, that I mentioned doesn't really apply, by the way, to some of the first hire. It's good when you have a little bit of structure, so probably at least 4 or 5 reps minimum. I think I'm also looking for builders, and I think to some extent that touch around Bart's attribute for first, because you don't know much when you're just getting started. You may have a product market fit, maybe you don't. And I think what I like with Bart is he was talking about this internal feedback, which is literally what a startup should be, right? It's that lean startup of iterating, but it's the same as sell. Like, are we going after the right ICP? We might have hypothesis, but most likely you're wrong, and that's okay, right? You are testing. So you also need a seller that is comfortable being wrong and also accept that, management, so to speak, doesn't have the playbook figure it out, and he's okay with that. He's okay that the product might take a different direction because, when you go to market, you learn, you could pivot, you might change your company. Like, I've been part of company that was selling to telecommunication. A year later, we were retail focused 100%, right? So you need someone that is comfortable as a seller to go through this iteration, whether it's product, whether it's process, whether it's, I'm going to a conference the next week, this has nothing to do. I'm going to a B2C one day, I'm going to a B2B meetup the next day. I'm selling to I'm using extreme example here, but the point is that someone who is very versatile in their approach to sales, and kind of like Angel, the build part, those are very different from an enterprise account executive who's coming fast forward maybe a year, 2 years, or 10 years, doesn't matter, who has $1 million quota plus, who needs to go in and he wants to make money. He has 90 days to learn. He wants to make money in Q2 or Q3 at the worst, else he's gone. Either he's not good or you're not good as a hiring or as an organization, but that's very different.
Yeah, I completely recognize that. And you shouldn't let yourself getting too rushed in that ICP. Yeah? Like, you first need to get enough feedback, because otherwise you could even run in the wrong direction. But I agree that as soon as you start scaling up and professionalize, that's what we also saw, is that then the sales guys are asking for a more clearly defined ICP. They want the marketing messaging to be tailored around a certain product or a certain vertical or a certain region, and even you're evolving. So I saw a question passing by, somebody saying, like, how do you define your ICP? Like, it's not a one-off trick. It's something that evolves with the product. You start with, like, in the beginning, it's that big idea. You think that the product at least serves a purpose, and then slowly you figure out where it fits. And then at a certain moment, and I think for us, it was also when we found out what the buying cycle was, that also then made it much sharper. When we got to the point, okay, we now know what kind of market, we know what problem it solves, but then we also started figuring out who is actually the buyer. Then you really are able to really suddenly go from this ICP into that type of ICP, and you're equally successful. You only spend your dollars better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So you're probably addressing one of the questions, which is also.
I'm not sure if I'm still echoing. Otherwise, I'll just leave it open. Is it okay? Or?
I think you.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh yeah, you're echoing. Sorry. Don't take it personally. Okay, cool. So we're slowly getting. We can move to another topic. So we went through the sales organization and then to the market strategy. And at the beginning, once you have the startups, it's very hard to define where's your market, which countries you should go after, which client, which type of companies you should go, either verticals or size based. So, and then based on that, you do also hiring. It's a little bit, I guess, easier in the US. Once you have a huge market with one language, it's a little bit more complicated in Europe, where you have pretty much the same size of the market, a little bit smaller, but 50 languages. So guys, if you can share with the audience as well, like how this thinking process happen? So how to evaluate the market based on what do you look at it, and how do you define the verticals where you should go? And then maybe there's always a continuous feedback loop, right? Because not all the time it is correct for the first shot.
I almost don't dare to unmute, but I'll give it a try anyway. So, like, sorry for the echoing, everybody. Well, I think again, it's a bit of an interesting journey, I would say, and that could, I think, for us, it was a bit related to the fact that we also had our other product. So that was already like a solid product in the market from 2004 and things like that. So you're first riding that wave, and then you realize, okay, we need to change it a bit. And I would say our first approach was, and that also came out of our inbound lead generation and the thought leadership. So we had, let's say, opportunities coming from all the places. So what's then a bit of the mistake that we made in the beginning is that you think you try to conquer the world at once. You have your partners, your sales managers, you get the leads. Okay, let's go into everything. It works to a certain extent, but then you also realize that in all areas, like it doesn't work for the product, it doesn't work for like. And what we then did, and that is, I think, also pretty typical, is that the first thing what you then think is like, okay, what's the vertical that we dive into? Or are there certain countries that we go into? Or are we going to chase a certain group of our competition? Or are we going to a Fortune 500 list or something like that? So those are very, let's say, typical verticals, which we looked at first. But then we realized that if we would look at the market like that, then on the one hand, we would still have a too broad focus, or in some areas we would skip clients that would actually, let's say, match the product better. So we actually turned that back a bit to, and we got back to the value discussion, like what is actually the problem that we're solving for what type of market? And we, for example, realized pretty quickly that we were actually solving a content challenge around localizations and global management of content in all kind of places for large organizations. So that's not typically a vertical or something that you very easily can purchase a tool and get your target account list from. So it meant that we needed to work much more on our own, let's say, definition of ICP fit, try to organize our technology in a way that we're still able to recognize that based on a couple of parameters. But for example, like how do you measure digital maturity of a client? How do you measure, if you get in leads, like whether they have a certain content challenge or not? Yeah, you can measure how many language they're using, how their geographical structure is. So for us, it was pretty complicated to get from that ideal client profile actually into our whole sales process, into our technology, into that stack. And I think that what I think what we learned the most is that the typical approach is sometimes the easiest, but is not really always fitting the product. So there's obviously a lot of different listeners. For some companies, it works perfectly well. You just pick a market or a vertical and you're done. But sometimes you have a product which is really about the value proposition of the product, and you build your atypical, fully specialized focus for yourself. That's actually what we did, and yeah, so far it works out. And in a sense, you skip the noise a little bit then.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thanks. Arnaud?
Yeah, I mean, as Bart says, it really depends on your product and your target, even if you don't know who they are, perhaps when you start. And then, as you said, also rightfully so, Jacob, the whole Europe versus US. I've worked with startups that are US based. I opened an office in London. I've worked with European startup coming to the US. So there's a lot of like geographically. I think if you're really just getting started or in your early like even sub 2 million, I think in ARR. For me, it starts with a very good understanding of the TAM. And I shared in my stories that we were making a big mistake by segmenting companies in a way that's not aligned with our product and the potential ARR that's associated with. So for me, it started like, what is the actual TAM? And it's okay to be wrong. you know, as Bart mentioned, you could be one vertical and you're very good at it. You could be, let's say, 7 verticals, I mean industries, or you could be like MongoDB, where you could sell a database to, you know, anybody, and then the TAM is very broad. But trying to really understand what is exactly your TAM, what does it look like, and you have to like filter it through many different filters, whatever it might be, according to your product, whether it's market cap, sales, number of employees, because as you build now your sales organization, you have to think about the productivity of your rep and how many accounts they can manage and opportunities and quotas and everything. So it's all kind of tied up together, but it starts with a very good understanding of your TAM. And I think people don't spend enough time on this because they rush very much. So like they know they can sell it to a lot of people, but they don't know exactly how many companies you can sell it to, whether it's the US and obviously Europe with the segmentation of countries, there is complexity that comes into that. You know, because if you don't understand that, then that's going to help you, especially if you're in Europe. How many reps do I need? Where do I place them? Is it better to have 5 reps in, I'm just using example from American company like in London that tackle, you know, Northern Europe, Central, South. I see Bart, you smiling. You probably went through this conversation. If you're based in the Czech Republic, does it matter to tackle Czech first and dominate the market before to go to more maybe other Western Europe countries? But for me, it all starts with a very good understanding of the TAM. And I consult with some SaaS startup. You'll be surprised at companies that are even up to like 10 millions in ARR. You ask them about the TAM, they know their ICP by heart. They show you chart, you know, every department, every buyers, they know you where their sweet spot is, they know where their potential coaches, influencers, where they win deal, where they lose it. And you ask them about the TAM, they're like, yeah, we just target like financial industries or like banking. You know, we sell to banks. But I'm like, how many banks are you selling to? Like, how many can you sell to? Like, is it JP Morgan Bank or is it like, you know, I mean, I guess in Europe, maybe like, I don't know what a regional bank would sounds like, but you know what I mean? Like very, very lack of understanding of what the TAM looks like. I think just to complement all what Bart was saying on ICP, for me, that's another component when you get started.
And I think also that what you sometimes see is that when the total addressable market sometimes gets created by opportunities, then for some reason accidentally you run into a certain vertical, you win 3 clients, you have 3 client cases, and then everybody in the organization thinks that that's your go-to market and let's build a whole strategy around it without any analysis on if this were the only 3 or not. Just give a bit of a strange example, but you know what I mean. Yep. But it's just a risk of like, and it's great to be a bit flexible, but you have to be like, the beginning is really going to find out where are we going, because then you can create your growth path from startup to scale up to your 30 million ARR that you also mentioned.
Yep. Cool. Thank you for that. Yep. I will put here one question. I guess that's going to be a little bit of debate, and that's when to start with partners at the beginning. What do you recommend? So is it rather to focus on direct with the first salespeople? If yes, then when to start with the partners? What's your opinion on that? Because eventually all the tech companies would like to get partners that resell their technologies.
Well, yeah, like it's more scalable in the long run, I would say, but you need to have the right partners. That's also clear. So we did a bit the opposite. Like if our other product is running very much on partner business, we are running very much on direct business. That's an approach that we consciously took because we also saw that a lot of organizations were able to implement our technology themselves, don't always need partners to support that, at least not from an implementation perspective. But sometimes a little bit a step up. What they need is a partner for digital transformation. But we are always a little bit later into the mix. I think now, actually, this year, we also realized that on the direct side, at a certain moment, you run to a bit of like your maximum capacity of scaling, because then the scaling is only limited to what you're able to, let's say, how many salespeople you're able to add, how much marketing and demand generation you're able to put in. So I think there will always be a moment when you should activate partners, and that is a very broad meaning. Yeah? Can be technology partners, can be, but you should definitely use them to generate a pipeline. And the better it's good for both, the better it works. And if it's one direction, it will never work. But so also in our scenario, so we now actually didn't move the needle suddenly from direct to partners, but we actually said, well, where we had it, let's say, completely on the client side, we're now moving it a little bit also to the partner side. And I think we're still searching for a bit of the ideal mix, but I believe it will always be a mix in the end.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. You can go on, Arnold, if you want.
Yeah. I think, to me, I have a mixed feeling. There's good and bad, like Bart mentioned. I strongly believe that you can do a lot of manage up to like 50 million. You could do direct sales, no problem. I know when you are I would say a small startup, or like most of the startup are small to start with. So like if you're doing below 30 million, that's what, even below 10 million, that's probably most of a startup anyway. So it's very appealing when you have someone from Deloitte contacting you, or you are in touch and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all the blue chip logos that they have. Or, you have guys from Microsoft Azure, because obviously they have an army of salespeople, and it looks good on paper. And whoever, there's other type of partners, system integrators, or depending on your industry, there might be all big players. But I've seen the movie where it looks good on paper. When you actually, I'm very much an executor. When you move to execution, to see, okay, I don't want to, Azure or any AWS or other partners. You're a small fish in a big pond for those guys. Unless your product is really aligned with whatever the company does, or maybe that vertical, or there's got to be a much greater fit. So they have, in other words, a very strong incentive to actively, not proactively, but actively sell your product. For me, partnership sales comes much later, at least to me. I think it's more of a, and again, that may depend on product, etc. But it's after 50 million in ARR. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't start. It doesn't mean you can do some testing. It doesn't mean there's some good opportunities, right? But it's just, I've done the mistake, to be honest with you. So I know by experience to just, whether it's consulting firm, whether it's SI, software houses, it has to be aligned. And again, you could spend sometimes 6 months trying to negotiate a deal with them of how commission is going to work from your team and their team and the partners. Like, it's much more complicated than it sounds. And when it moves to execution of how do I actually go after the business, that's also when you're going to start to see the gap. Like, you may be very proud and there's a great PR that goes out, but you'll realize after 1 year, like, how many deals are we actually closed? How many pitch have we actually done together? You realize that the number is very small. So I would focus on building your organization if you are below 25 million, for sure.
I think well, you wanted to have a bit of debate, Jacob. Well, I agree to a certain extent here. I definitely agree that when you look at big SIs or big consultancy firms like the Deloittes and Accentures, and we all know them, or when you look at the Microsoft, the Salesforce, and stuff like that, then of course you're a big like a small fish in the big pond. I completely agree on that. So I think it's important, if you want to work with partners, that you always try to find a match with the partner level type of partners that are, in a sense, in a certain same stage of maturity. Like for us, what works really well is we, for example, our best partners are, I would say, semi-global partners that have some strong foothold in either US or in Europe and DACH or whatever, but that also are selling in a few other areas, but have strong foothold somewhere. So they're a bit global, but they have like 1,000 to 3,000 people. They're not like the size of the EPAMs and the Capgeminis. For them, they can't do everything. So they also, it's much easier to get a bit of a mature relation with those partners where there's a mutual benefit in growing together. And for us, for example, really interesting to know, like we don't work with commissions with partners. Yeah, when they are like the top tier partner, then they get a little bit on the first sell, but it's peanuts on their deal. Because we also find out if we try to build like a commission type of relation, then what also happens if you don't make the results or you're not able to generate enough deals together, that organization or the sales manager on the partner steps away and says, well, okay, this is not a successful software vendor, I'm going away. So there needs to be a different incentive that it needs to help us both, and then it works. But that's a very niche group of partners, at least that work for us, and the rest is a lot of noise. I agree with you. Yeah.
Cool. Guys, we're running out a little bit of time because we're right now 7 minutes over. So I would pick, I guess, there one very nice question from Tomasz Kepa. Unfortunately, he left already. And maybe that would be ideal for you, Arnold, because that's the challenge which you have in front of you right now in Tatum. What is the most reasonable way to build a sales team from scratch? So maybe if you can describe the stages which you have in your head right now.
Sure. We go back to the same thing, people, process, technology, right? So there's obviously a lot of things that you don't know, but you can build a very easy playbook with whatever product or market you are tackling. From that, you can work with I start with the people. So you can start with a small core team, right? So what that means is, one or two rep, depending on obviously the market size and everything, but start with one or two. As a head of sales, you also going to be heavily involved in the deals to get the learning. Now, this is not a backseat type of thing. We're talking literally just getting started. I think very quickly you need to understand inbound versus outbound, which we talked. I think Bart was great to explain his journey, but for us at Tatum, our business is heavily inbound at the moment. So for me, what that means, it's a luxury that I've never had inbound in my entire career. I think you and I were joking about it when we first met, Jacob. And so for me, outbound becomes very natural. I mean, you've seen how I think about pipeline generation. So what does that mean? It's probably started to think, what is outbound from people, process, and technology? So you could live with two SDR, two rep pretty quickly on a cost-effective way. Then you have I would say, I would think about sales ops very quickly. I know it's a sort of a luxury role that people start to hire when you have more people, more tools. It is something that I'm very bullish on, to think about rather earlier than later in what your core team looks like. And you can find, affordable junior, you can outsource, but think about it as a function. And then from a tech stack perspective, I know we could spend maybe hours on it, but you could do a lot of damage with 4 simple tools. You need a CRM, Salesforce, Upstop of other guys. You need your Zoom info, whatever data you're going to pull your database from other vendors to available. You need a sales engagement tool, Outreach, Sales Love or others, and Sales Nav. Plenty of other smaller widgets.
You need a bank account to get the invoices paid.
Well, you do that, and you have like free tools. You have other stuff. Don't get me wrong, depending on the envelope that you have. But I think as a starting point, think about the core team. You think about the technology that you need, and you think about process. There is a question that was there, like how much process do you put? I think for me, I would say you put process on day one, I say a lot, like discipline creates freedoms, right? Process creates freedom. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like that process, that sales process is going to be vastly different from 5 years when you have all your stages, calibrated with like gates and what the activities that is required. We're not talking this when you start, even if it's basic, but you need a little bit of processes, whatever it is, because you need to hire at the same time. So you need to onboard fast, no matter your stage. And number 2, you need to establish the benchmark of performance. Even if there is no performance, you need to establish where you are today in order to see what the improvement could be. And to do that, you need processes, because if you can't measure anything, you can't really make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you. Bart, if you have anything to add.
I wanted to say here. I don't have more to add. This, I think you're hitting the head on the nail.
Absolutely,
You're
absolutely.
hitting the nail on the head. This is terrible.
Yeah, this is the right one. Absolutely agree with everything what have been said. Okay, guys, I think I could spend with you and talking for hours and hours. So maybe that would be better afterwards once we both in Brno that we can go for a bottle of wine or beer. I don't know, whatever you prefer. Um, I would like to thank you for participating in this webinar and the panel discussion afterwards. It was very, very insightful and fruitful for me, and I hope also for the participants that stayed here with us. Sorry, guys, in audience that we get a little bit delayed by 12 minutes, so hopefully it didn't destroy your night. And I guess if you have more of the questions or the questions we didn't manage to cover, then yeah, feel free to message either Bart or Arnaud. Uh, guys, I hope you're okay with that
Of
to,
course.
to, to get answers. Yeah, the whole webinar has been recorded, so it will be put on our website. So once you want anything, once you want to play it again, you can go for it. Okay, huge thanks, guys.
Thanks
Thank you
for
very
having
much.
us.
It was a
Okay,
pleasure.
see you, everybody.